Hello, everyone. This is Angie from TechServe Alliance. Welcome to today's webinar, Compensation Insights for IT and Engineering Staffing Firms, Trends, Benchmarks, and Best Practices. There will be a question and answer session following the presentation, so please write any questions you want answered in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of the screen. We are also recording today's presentation, which will be available on the TechServe Alliance website and distributed to in follow-up emails. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Tom Nunn, consultant at Tom Nunn Consulting.
Well, hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Really pleased to spend the next hour with you. We've got a good agenda, a lot of good slides to go through, so let's get started. Today's agenda, we're going to go through some industry compensation trends. We're going to talk about some common flaws with sales and recruiting comp plans, compensation plan best practices, using a carrot versus a stick, which is kind of a fun couple of slides to go through, how to track and measure impact and affordability, extremely important, a sample modeling tool, which I'll pull up an Excel spreadsheet and kind of walk through some stuff. And then effective sales and recruiting leader compensation plans. We probably won't get deeply into that, but I've got a couple of slides on that. Then we'll have a Q&A and recap. A lot of stuff to go through, but let's get going. So some industry compensation trends. And what I should have said at the beginning, I've been in this industry now. I'm in my 25th year. I joined a staffing company here in the Boston area in 2000. We grew that, a company called the Eliason Group. We grew that. We sold it to the first PE. I left in 2009, and I've been an industry consultant since then. And I've worked with many staffing companies all over the country. But I do spend a lot of time on compensation because it's one really important area to get it right. So let's jump into some trends and some ideas. There have been for the last couple of years, as everybody knows, that inflation roared its ugly head over the past couple of years. So there's been pressure on salaries, and more on that later on some of the do's and don'ts. But one of the things that we talk a lot about is avoid, when you're giving someone a salary raise or a group of people, avoid labeling it a cost of living adjustment or COLA. That's just my opinion, but I think if when you work in some companies, non-staffing, non-sales and recruiting, you typically get a raise based on where inflation is, and that's a COLA raise. When I was in this industry, people came in at a certain salary, and they came in because they wanted to make $500,000 in commissions, and salary was not that important. It is important, but it's what's more important is that you keep salaries relatively reasonable and everybody at the same levels at the same salary. Commission plan percentages have remained relatively stable. Where there's been a little pressure on salaries, and a lot of people passed out salaries, gave raises. The commission percents have been relatively stable. Weekly or monthly gross margin dollars, commonly called spread, commission tiers, is far and away the most common. I would say that maybe 2/3 of the industry either pays commissions on weekly spread or monthly spread. Pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to administer. One of the trends that I'm seeing a lot now, give new sales hires a working account to gain some momentum. And one comment that I feel very strongly on is, do not hesitate to split large accounts in a logical way. I work with some companies where, some of the bigger companies that say, and this is my philosophy, we own that account, not the salesperson. And we're not looking to take something away from them. But if you're doing business with ABC Corp and you're a great salesperson's got 25 people billing there, but they're only working with 10 hiring managers, and there's 110 elsewhere around the country, break it up in a logical way. You, as the company owner, own the account, and as long as it's logical and you're not taking billable headcount away from someone, split it up. It's twofold. One, you'll increase your business in those large accounts. Number two, you're giving a new hire a working account, which helps them get off the mark quicker. Effective comp plans, but less common. This is what I had in my former company. The better the GM percent, the higher the commission percent. We're going to talk quite a bit about good compensation plans, motivate desired behavior. And where if you're paying out, if you get a 25% commission or gross margin on a deal, you get, I'm making the numbers up, you get an 8% commission. If you get 28 gross margin, you get a 10% commission. It will drive good behavior so that you're negotiating. I've seen this 2 or 3 times. It can be very effective. It's not a lot of people do this, but commission starts after a producer hits their break point based on their salary. One of the benefits of this is if someone says, I want to come to you on a $100,000 salary, say, okay, but you're not going to start earning commissions until you're past your monthly salary. Someone says, okay, oh, no, I want to start at a $50,000 salary because they'll earn commissions when they're past their monthly salary. Fairly uncommon, but pretty darn effective. And this is, a negative trend. Overpaying for experienced producers who are out of work or on the market right now is way, way, way too common. If any of you have experienced this, a lot of people have. We went through, and we're still going through a pretty tight IT staffing market. But as we went through COVID and things really started to go down, maybe in late 2022 or 23, companies began to get more discipline on letting people that really weren't producing well, letting them go. So there's lots of people. I've got nothing. There's nothing wrong with someone with 10 years of IT staffing being on the market, but be very, very cautious and very discerning as to why they're on the market. And it's just way too common that someone jumps on it, they bring them in, and they're a failure. One of the things, and I've got several little asterisks in all my slides talking about some past webinars. We did at I did a TechServe seminar this April on hiring best practice as a framework for success. And by the way, this webinar and any other webinar that I've done, many of the webinars that other people have done, and most of the sessions at the annual conference are all on the TechServe website, I think in the learning section. So for those of you that are on this webinar, if you don't have a login, talk to Angie or talk to Julie, talk to someone at TechServe, get a login. You can get all these slides. You can see all the other past webinars, and it's really good for you. Common flaws with sales and recruiting comp plans. High salaries because that's what it takes to attract talent. Use guarantees instead. We could spend 10 minutes on how good guarantees work. We don't have the time today, but someone says, I want a $120,000 salary. And you say, well, our top salary for a real experienced person is $75,000. But I'm happy to give you a $4,000 a month recoverable draw. So any month where your commissions are less than 4,000 for the first year, I'll true it up to 4,000. I'm just making those numbers up, but a good guarantee is a non-recoverable draw for the person. But you don't just give them the guarantee. You reconcile it against their monthly commissions. The first few months, you're probably paying. If there's a $4,000 guarantee, they've got no commissions the first month. Write a check for 4,000. Maybe the second month they've got 300 in commissions. Write them a check for 3,700. But if you get into the 5th, 6th, 7th month and you're still writing checks for 3,500 or 4,000, you should have cut your losses. I just see way too often. And I think I've got right here 10 producers, 10 different salaries equals headaches. Lack of transparency, a lot of one-offs. You just pay what it takes to bring someone in. It's an undisciplined way to do it. Just assume that at some point, and it's fairly common, everybody starts talking about their salaries. And you bring someone in at $120,000 salary, 6 months later, that person is like fifth out of six salespeople because they're no good. And word gets out that they're making 120,000. When they come to you and say, "Why are they making 120,000? I'm at the top of the list and I'm making 80,000." I'm kind of saying this tongue. You say, because I'm undisciplined and I gave them 120,000. So good to have um, salary tiers. Ineffective in motivating the needed behavior. Too slow to cut your losses for poor producers. We've got a lot of that later on when we start talking about contribution multiples, and have more discipline around letting people go. You're going to make mistakes when you bring people in. Um, big companies like Tech Systems that brings in brand new people out of college, and they probably hire in a good market 5 to 10,000 a year. Their turnover in the first year is 70%, but they can afford that. So either they fire people or people quit. If you had turnover because you got better at hiring and you had discipline in letting people go that aren't working out, frankly, a turnover in the first year to die for would be more like 1/3. You're going to have some turnover if you've got the discipline to cut your losses. This is way too common, allowing producers to cruise on large legacy commissions. Someone's making $250,000 on a $75,000 salary. They've got 50 people working on 2-year contracts. They're barely even coming to work, let alone spending time looking for more spread. There's ways to combat that. High comp for no touch, low influence business. This is unfortunately too common as well. If you've got markup, MSP, there's 25 vendors on the list, you can't walk the halls, and the only way you can make money is if you get good scorecards. Having high touch, if you will, salespeople making large commissions, it's really an account manager who's not really a salesperson you ought to have on that. It's all about good recruiting, and then the account manager pays attention to scorecards and those sort of things, and they get paid differently and lower. When typically those types of business, you're making 18% margins, give or take. You can't afford to pay commissions. You'd be paying people that are on high touch business and doing 30% margins. Another flaw is too complicated, hard to understand or administer, too rich so you can't make a profit. Unfortunately, this is all too common as well. So let's go to some best practices. Good compensation programs are aligned with the company strategy. That sounds so specific or so logical. But a company strategy could be, I'm going to move towards some solutions business. So I'm going to start having a solutions comp plan. I'm going to focus all on no touch business. So I'm going to have a comp plan that does that. I'm going to focus on getting new customers or higher margin business. So when you think about what your strategy is or what you want it to be, align the comp plan. Good comp plans reward behaviors that drive the results. And the behavior that drive results is spread dollars, because they recognize the difference between results and effort. This might sound a little bit cruel, but results are your spread dollars, what you're making your commissions on. Effort is how hard you're working. But you could be working 12 hours a day, but if you're not very good at what you do and you're not putting people to work and you've got very low spread, the effort is not what you should be paid for. It's the results. Emphasize pay for performance and reward superior performance with accelerators. A little bit more on that later on. And accelerators, frankly, could be over and above the commission plan. It could say for my $1 million a year producers, you get a $5,000 bonus at the end of the year. My people that are at 700 cumulative for the year, they get another bonus. So there's ways that you can kind of add that piece for your top 20-25% of performers. Good comp plans are uniform for groups of people performing the same role. We talked a little bit about that. Sales commissions are lower for no touch business. We talked about that. They certainly fall within a range of acceptable impact to the company's overall profitability. We talked about that and more on that later. They're fair, consistent, and predominantly based on quantitative instead of subjective results. One area that I know a couple of relatively large companies that have begun to say for brand new people, and they hire young men and young women right out of college, and they say, I'll make the number up. You're coming in at a $45,000 salary, but your first raise to 50,000 isn't based on your spread dollars. That'll come. It's based on achieving, 4 straight weeks of agreed to activity metrics. That's not even that subjective, but that's based on you getting a raise based on good activity, which sets you up for good spread down the road. Well communicated, transparent, easy to understand, and then are customized for leaders based on the role and ability to influence certain results. Carrot versus a stick. Using a carrot or stick approach when you're doing your compensation planning involves balancing rewards, which are carrots, and penalties, which are sticks, to drive desired behaviors for sales and recruiting staff. It's a lot easier, more fun, less controversial to use a carrot versus a stick approach, because it's easier to implement carrot incentives but it's easier to put carrots in place when you're revamping an overall comp plan. And I've got a slide later on that'll give you some ideas on that, because you could do a marginal reduction in commission tiers to allocate dollars to fund the carrot. So you could say, here are my 8 different commission tiers based on what your weekly and monthly spread is. Maybe you reduce some of them by 1 or 2%, but you more than make that up by some carrots. So you're not adding to the cost of your comp plan. You're just rearranging where you're getting the money for commissions and the carrot. Sometimes a stick is needed to help with overall comp affordability for an up or out resolution for 4 performers, including cruisers. And I've got some thoughts on that. Here's some carrot ideas. Bonus or commission percent increase for hitting new GM quota in each quarter. This is really a good one. It also can be used as a stick. And this is also a way to avoid cruisers. You could look at someone's gross margin spread for the previous quarter, and going to the next one, you give them a reasonable new GM, which is new starts. It's not extensions, it's new starts. Let's say someone in Q3 of this year did 200,000 in spread dollars in the quarter. That's a pretty darn good producer. You've got to think about this, but you might say, and this is customized by person, but you could say, okay, in Q4, you've got a quota to get 50,000 in new spread. You're going to have fall offs. That's natural in the business. But you could give them a bonus if they hit their new spread quota. So that's got to be customized by person, sometimes by class of people, depending on where they are in there. Bonus for new customers. This is very, very effective and common. On the sales side, I love a bonus plan that says you bring in a new customer. Look at the second bullet, because this is really sales. I'm going to give the recruiter, because there could be more than one recruiter, maybe a $500 bonus for the first couple of starts. But in sales, if you're not careful and you give out a $5,000 bonus for bringing in a new logo, they bring it in, they get a couple starts, and they go hunting for the next logo. They fail to land and expand within the existing logo because they're not incented to do that. Remember, good comp plans motivate desired behavior. So what if you said you break into a new logo from the date of the first start, not the date of the MSA signing, the date of the first start, for 1 calendar year from the date of the first start, 1 year forward. As the spread for that customer hits certain tiers, you're getting bonuses. You have to model it out, but maybe as soon as the spread hits 5,000, which is, or 3,000, which is one person for 1 month, maybe they're getting $1,000 bonus. But if cumulative over the first year, they got $250,000 of spread from that customer because they got in, they landed, they're killing it there. Maybe they've got 15,000 in cumulative bonuses. I'm making the numbers up, but you can see the point. And remember, that is not a added commission. That's a one-time bonus. So incent them not only to bring in a new customer, but to grow that customer. Also train them up front. This is more of a sales training. Don't spend 6 months going after a customer that if you had 30% of all the IT contractors there, you'd have 3 contractors. Doesn't mean that you wouldn't spend a little time trying to bring that in, but spend more time on customers that might have 50 contractors at any given time, and you want to get 30% of that. So spend more time at the beginning of your prospecting on how important is that prospect to bring in, because we could really be killing it there. Activity-based incentive. That's something that I'm hearing more and more of. But that could be, this is more of a score sheet on a quarter-to-quarter basis. Offer incentives. You could have a score sheet, a little complex, but it could say every start is X points. Every client meeting is a few less points. Candidate connects and submissions on the recruiting side, you get points. You get a start. Phone calls, all that. I know one company, I won't mention their name, but at the end of the quarter, if they achieve very superior scorecard in points, they get a $6,000 bonus. Someone that hits their scorecard gets a $3,000 bonus. Remember, it's all bonus, and you got to be careful when you put the points in place. Highest points go to starts, and then you work your way backwards. But a good way to give some really push activity. Some carrot ideas, continuing. Bonus for better GM for new starts in a quarter. You could do this in lieu of new GM for the quarter. You could do it in addition to. But if you're doing, if you're doing 25% gross margin as a firm in your high touch business and you want to get it to 27%, and you're a $40 million company, it's very challenging to go in 1 year from 25 to 27 because you got a lot of people on billing averaging 25. If you begin to say, well, let's focus on the gross margin percent on all of our new starts. As a company, as a salesperson, as a recruiter, and then start giving bonuses. If you average for your new starts 27%, you get a bonus. That can also be very effective. Salary raise for hitting targets. Some of the larger companies I work with and some of the smaller companies, they might have 3 or 4 tiers salaries. Rookies come in at 50. Their top tier might be 75 or 80. But you get a salary raise when you hit certain weekly or monthly spread. So to get to that top tier of, let's say, $80,000 salary, you might have to be at $15,000 a week or $50,000 a month. So there's a reason that they're getting a salary raise, and it's not because they've been with the company for 10 years. That's BS to give them salary raises based on how long they've been there. Give them salary raises based on their production being superior. Weekly or monthly GM is better than that. Activity metrics, good for rookies. We talked about that. And then there's some carrot, team bonus or other perks. This is fun. You know, Labor Day is already come and gone, but I know some companies that say, I know a company here in the Boston area that says, if let's say they're at 200 billable headcount, and they say to the company, if we can, if by December 15th, we're at 225 billable, the whole company's closed down the week between Christmas and New Year's. The whole company, including back office, everybody's shut down. That same company and other companies might say in February or March, they might say, if by May 15th, we're at X billable headcount, we'll take the Friday before Memorial Day off, so you've got a nice 4-day weekend. And again, it's the whole company. But they keep track of the billable headcount. They promote it on a scoreboard, and everybody's rallying around, oh my gosh, we're getting close, we're getting close, we're getting close. That can be a lot of fun. I know a company, they very well could be on this call. They've been doing this for several years, and it's really effective. Again, I'll make the numbers up, but they say we're going to keep track of every start this week, and their week starts on Friday and it ends at close of business on Thursday. And we're going to look at all starts and the gross margin per hour. Let's say it's $20. And if by Thursday at 5 o'clock, we hit, again, I'm making the numbers up, we hit 120,000 in gross margin per hour, everybody leaves at 3:30. If we hit 130, it's 3. If we hit all the way up to 160, we're all out at noon. They post that, they're remote now, but they post that on a virtual scoreboard, and you can hear everybody, clapping, patting each other virtually on the back because they're getting closer and closer and closer to having a noon or a 1 o'clock release. Really a lot of fun and a really good and teamwork, and again, everybody. Celebrations for all staff. Stick ideas. Again, we talked about this being the opposite. Set new GM quota for producers in each quarter. If failure to achieve, they get a 25% haircut to all their commissions for the following quarter. Painful. And if they don't like it, then leave and give their account to someone else, or give their, you know what I mean? I hate to sound like Attila the Hun, but we've all dealt with cruisers that are sitting on very large books of business. They're not really working. They're making a lot of money. And if you're foolish enough to pay them all these commission dollars and they're barely putting anybody to work, then shame on you. Again, this is a stick. It's better to have a carrot, but a stick can work. Same concept for hitting reasonable activity-based scorecard. Push accountability best practice for underachieving performance. Your job depends on you generating more GM dollars or starting or stopping specific behaviors. Remember that everyone's watching what leaders do. Review the importance of building a successful company culture based on accountability. I did that at the down in Amelia Island with 2 other CEOs back in 2023, November at the Executive Summit. Really good scorecards in there, some really good stuff that someone did on something called Crucial. Everybody's heard of Crucial Conversations. She read the book by the same author, Crucial Accountability. How do you motivate people and push them? But if you're not getting what you need, how do you have hard conversations? Good producer tools. Basic training on how to calculate GM percent in dollars. Margin calculator on the desktop. I hope most of you have that. If you don't, just go out to the TechServe Executive Forum, which you all should be spending time on. It's a wonderful way to trade ideas. But a margin calculator is really a spreadsheet, and it's simple algebra. If my bill rate is this, and my burden pay rate for a W-2 consultant is this, here is the margin dollars and margin percent. And you can say, okay, I want to get a better margin dollars or better margin percent. So I got to work on a slightly lower pay rate or a slightly higher bill rate. I've seen some wonderful margin calculators that are color coded. And anything that's red, don't do that unless you get permission from the VP of Sales or Recruiting, because it's a crappy margin. Negotiation best practices. When I was in the business, we used to have periodic lunch and learns, and we would talk, pull the recruiters together, pull the sales together, sometimes pull sales and recruiters together in one group, and we talk about what's working. By the way, I don't have it here, but for kicks yesterday, I went to ChatGPT. Everybody's heard of that, probably has it. Just go to ChatGPT and say, what are negotiation best practices for salespeople in the temp staffing business? Wham! It sits there and thinks for all of 9 seconds, and I've got 11 best practices right here. What are negotiation best practices for recruiters in this temp staffing business? Again, 9 seconds later, and I've got 14 things. Do that. Whatever you're using for AI, go to ChatGPT. Circulate that with your sales and recruiting teams. Have conversations around that. What are you good at? Where would you like to get better? Do role playing, but teach people what are good negotiating tactics and really reinforce that. It's so important. The sales and recruiting team work both sides. That's really the same thing, when you're using a margin calculator and you say, okay, we want to get a 28% margin. I'm the salesperson. I say, I'm going to work my darndest to get $4 more in the bill rate, and says to his or her recruiter, can you work really hard and try to get a $4 less in the pay rate, because it's going to move us to a 28% margin. We actually, when I was in the business, we used to have periodic company meetings, and we ask for volunteer salespeople and recruiters to stand up together, a salesperson and recruiter, and talk about something good that happened and how they did that, typically around breaking into a new customer, getting a good margin. Really, really good stuff. This is pretty darn effective. Manage approval in advance for GM below X%. I've seen this work. If you're not doing it and you say, you're a high-touch business, you want to get 28% margins, put a process in place that says any margin below 25%, you got to get my approval. Doesn't mean you won't give them approval, because it could be breaking into a new account. So it's a bit of a loss leader. But I've seen owners that have done this in real life that went from doing 10 crappy margin deals a month to doing one a month, because they simply had to go to the owner, in this case, relatively small company, and get their okay. And they were conditioned to come in. Doesn't mean you're not going to give them permission, but they're conditioned to come in and say, this is why I want to do this deal. And if it's because they're lazy, or they're a bad negotiator, or they're too timid, that's a training opportunity. We're going to talk about the gross margin ramp schedule and making a team scoreboard. That's really a lot of fun. We're going to talk, we only got a half hour. Report on contribution margin and multiple. That's for executives only, not for salespeople to see. And more of this on later slides. So one of the things to do, I just call this the compensation pie. We used to do this when I was in the business. And by the way, I'm intermediate at Excel. You just put these 4 things. What typically, out of all my compensation for sales and recruiting, how much of it is salary? In this case, 25%. How much is commissions? 45%. Employer taxes, 12%. Employer bennies, 8%. Custom bonus. You just can go right into Excel once you put these in rows and the percentages, and it'll do a pie chart for you. I love the visuals of a pie chart. The reason I show this, and these are all made up numbers, the custom bonus in this example is 10%. So if you're all in fully burdened sales and recruiting, or sales comp plan, maybe you do a separate one for recruiting, this is where on a periodic basis, maybe on an annual basis, when you're thinking of revamping your comp plan, when I was in the business, we did this every year. Our commission percentages, I don't think they ever changed. But we always had that 10% slice of the pie. And we said, what are the things, how are we going to use that money this year? What behaviors do we want to motivate? One year it might have been bring in some new logos. Remember, a couple of years we said we've got only so many accounts that we've got 5 billable headcount. Let's give a big bonus to any salesperson that can get past 8 billable headcount at the same customer, and get past 10. And there's similar things you can do for recruiters. So this is a lot easier to do once you put it in place, because if you have to try to save 10% for these custom bonuses that you tweak once a year, and you've already got pretty high commissions, the only way to do it as you go into the new year is to reduce your commission percentages slightly to free up that money and put it into the custom bonuses. You could explain that exactly to your salespeople and recruiters, that this is why we're doing it. Anyway, this is a really good practice to go through. Model the impact of changes, plans before changing. I don't know who all is on this webinar, but for those of you who know me, know that I'm a data guy. I've never seen a piece of data that I don't like within reason. So I love to model data. Embrace the rule of thirds. And I think at the bottom here, there's an asterisk, and we went through the rule of thirds in another session we did along with Michelle Grassley Clark at TechServe at the Executive Summit last November. But the rule of thirds says staffing companies in the top quartile of industry profitability invariably have cost structures closely tied to gross margin. 1/3 of all their GM dollars covers fully burdened producer costs. That's commissioned sales and recruiting, not leaders. Another third covers all other expenses. That'd be rent, job boards, leaders, executives, anything else. And 1/3 falls to the bottom line. I've been looking at this for 20 years. And for those of you that participate in the operating practices report, the top quartile profitability in the industry is usually 9 to 10%. And guess what? Those companies, their typical gross margin is 27 to 30%. So to throw a little math at you, if your gross margin as percent of revenue is 30%, then 10% of your revenue or a third of your margin is covering fully burdened sales and recruiting. Another 10% of revenue or 33% of that margin is covering everything else. And 10% of that revenue is falling to your bottom line. I see a lot of companies. I run some roundtables, and the companies with the most discipline, and they're not only the big ones. They're dropping 1/3 of every margin dollar to the bottom line, but they've got the discipline on having good comp programs, giving people good training, but cutting their losses diligently, and just making sure they're controlling their expenses. Use a simple tool to model the impact of ratios using several variables. I'll show you that later on. Establish or update a ramp schedule. I think that's next. Determine impact on current producers if you're going to change your comp plan. If you're going to change a comp plan, maybe put some custom bonuses in place. I hate to say it this way, for people you dearly care about, because they're your best producers, they're very good. There's nothing that says that you can't ease them in for the first 3 to 6 months and say, well, you're on the new comp plan, but I'll true up your monthly commissions if they fall below X. And you give them a ramp of 3 to 6 months to get going. Don't do that for everybody. Do that for people that you really don't want to lose. They're great producers. Your mediocre ones, put them on the new comp plan. Avoid keeping some people on the old plan and never changing them. It just creates headaches. And their rule of thirds and related material, driving growth and profitability through data-driven management. 2003 executive, available on the TechServe website if you've got a login. So this is something that I've been using for years. And it's an Excel spreadsheet. You got to put a lot of thought into this. And these variables here in yellow should all drive this Excel spreadsheet. Because if your average bill rate is $85, your average gross margin is 25%, your average gross margin dollars per hour is 21.25. In a 40-hour month, it's $160 a month. It's $3,400 a month. What you can begin to do, and you can have a model that's based on where do I want someone's minimum spread to be from the first month they started out to 2 years, and then greater than 2 years. I'm a firm believer that it takes most people in this business 2 years to hit full stride. Some people argue that recruiters should hit their full stride quicker. Salespeople that you bring in that are really good, but they've got non-solicits, they can't go after their previous customers for the first year. It takes them a couple of years unless you're giving them some good accounts. But what you do is you have a minimum performance, average, and all-star, as in a baseball all-star. And you just begin to build and say, at the end, this is a monthly spread. At the end of 2 years, I want someone to still be employed with me to be at $25,000 a month. That's $300,000 a year. Some people would say, no way in heck I'm going to keep someone that's only bringing in $300,000 a year on the bus. That's totally up to you. This would say someone that's a medium average performer is at $48,000 a year. That's $575,000, which to me is a darn good producer. Someone that's an all-star after 2 years is at $85,000. That's $1 million producer. I've always said the top quartile producers in our industry, whether you're a salesperson or recruiter, produces $1 million plus a year. The average billable headcount is really just based on, this is not an interactive spreadsheet right here. If you're doing $120 bill rates at 30% margins, it affects how many people you got to have on billing to hit these numbers. This is really, really good to put in place. What I would tell you, if you put this in place, don't have expectations above what is common or reasonable. If you're not going to let someone stay on the bus if they're below $500,000 a year, you're going to throw out some average or mediocre people that are probably okay to stick around. But what you can do with this, and I think this is on the next, is you can have a scoreboard. And this gets into contribution multiple as well. So I wouldn't put this, I got a different scoreboard that I didn't put in here. But this shows that this person's been there 36 months. POT, by the way, is production over tenure. It's not the marijuana report. Chuckle. But this is performance over tenure. So the POT standard for someone that's been there for, I don't know if this spreadsheet is tightly correlated with this one. I didn't take the time, but this person's been there for 36 months. If you look at the greater than 2 years, the standard is to be at 56,000. They're at 88,000. Their cost is 16,100. There's 72,400 left over their fully burdened cost to pay for recruiting, to pay for executive, to pay for job boards, to pay for rent, and to drop 10% of the margin to the bottom line. That person has 4.5 times their cost left over. Anybody that's been with you for more than 2 years ought to be in the high threes up to around 4.5. If you have someone at 5.5, you got to get more money in their pocket because they should get more money. The reason this is dangerous to show anybody outside of leadership is that salespeople or recruiters, God bless them, we couldn't live without them in this business, but they'll say, holy smokes, you got 72,000 left over after I made 16,000. They don't care, and they don't necessarily understand that you've got a lot of other things you got to pay for, including some net income. But there's another scoreboard that I wish I would have put in here where you can show someone's production, their commissionable gross margin, forget this other stuff on their cost and contribution, but it'll show a color code. Are they green, yellow, or red? And that gives you the opportunity. Look at this person. Let me pick one. Someone that's been there for only 5 months. They'll show up on the team scoreboard that should show up once a week. They're at $7,000 already. Doesn't sound like a lot. Or at 5 months, they should be at $7,000 according to your ramp. They're at almost $9,000. They're going to show up slightly above break even for that there, but they're very good because they're ramping good. So this begins to show people that are ramping well. Look at this person, recruiter number 3 down here. Been with us 6 months. You're still losing money on them. And this comes out every month. I've been doing this for so long. when I ask owners, in what month is it reasonable for a new salesperson or recruiter to hit the first month where they cover their costs? Without thinking this, I want that to happen in the second or third month. And I say, not going to happen. Very rare. A good rule of thumb is your first person, the first month that they break even, if that's in the fifth or sixth month, not from the date of their start date, the first month that they covered their cost. If that's in month 5 or 6, you've got a good one. If they're in month 8 and they haven't even covered the cost in month 8, you got to start really thinking about whether they're long for your company. One of the things I'm going to do, give me a second just to switch really quickly. And I'm going to go through this pretty quick because we're pressed for time. But this is something I put together a long time ago, and it's pretty tedious. But if you've got a good numbers person, your controller, yourself, and you're pretty good with Excel, put one of these together. This shows anything in yellow is a cell you can change. And so here's my monthly tiers. Here's a percent that we pay within each tier. Here's their commissions at the top of the tier. And then I basically say, if someone's coming in at $7,000, which is an $84,000 salary, based on that salary, which is pretty high, and these commission plans. And by the way, down here, and this has to be looked at. This is a little bit old. Sorry. I actually have burden calcs. Because you can't just say I got a flat 25% burden on all my sales and recruiters. The more someone makes, you stop paying Social Security employer taxes. The impact of their benefits, at $8,000 a year is still $8,000. But you see someone that's brand new and they made $50,000. Your burden is 25% on them. If they're making $350,000, your burden is 4%. Because you're no longer paying Social Security, and the impact on their bennies and things like that goes way down. So we don't have time to spend a lot of time on this. But what this shows is if someone is at a $7,000 salary, which is pretty big, they could be $150,000 a month, which is a $1.8 million producer, and they're not even at a 4 multiple. They're only at 376. If someone is 6,466, I don't know where that, they're only at a 385. If someone's coming in at a $5,000 salary, they're finally at 4.8. But if we lower these tiers a little bit, if this works, I hope it does, because I'm on stage. Lower it to 10, lower it to 12, lower it to 15, lower it to 18. Okay. Well, this big producer is now at a 4.3% contribution multiple. And once they hit $1.2 million, they're at 4.21. Once they hit $1 million, these are quite reasonable numbers right here. So you see how this works. And this is something that is easy, relatively easy. It just takes a little bit of time and someone that knows Excel to put in place. So to the extent that you're changing, let me share again. To the extent that you're changing your comp plans, this is a good one to have in place. Sales and recruiting. I got to put this up here. This is for leaders. Great salespeople and recruiters produce great sales dollars. No one can spread dollars, I should say. No one's going to argue with that. Great sales leaders produce great sales people. If anybody remembers John Daly, that nutcase that was a speaker, good guy, he was a speaker at our conference for about 10 years. And he would say this: great salespeople produce great dollars. Great sales leaders produce great salespeople. I don't think he made that up, but maybe I plagiarized by putting this in here. But it's very important to understand it and embrace this. Promoting salespeople to sales leaders, if they continue to be primarily motivated by their own commissions, typically does not work well. Happens all the time. Team lead. Promoting salespeople to sales leaders who won't commit to focusing time on developing their effectiveness as a leader is ineffective. Growing or promoting salespeople to sales leaders or player coach or executive can be a key to company growth if emphasis on learning and practicing motivating and growing people, leadership skills. By the way, I'm doing a session, and there's another session going on at a conference that I'm helping out on leadership. So if you haven't signed up for the TechServe Executive Forum in Scottsdale, wonderful place to have a meeting, sign up. There's going to be a whole track on leadership. I've got some great stuff on you as owners, what you needed to hone your leadership. And then there's a great panel being put together led by Sue Thaden, who's an industry gem, on what do you do to begin looking at how do I promote people, identify and promote people that into leadership positions in my company. Let me go quickly on some sales and recruiting comp plans. All too common, but often, I should say always, most often ineffective. If you put someone in a leadership position and they still are on their own commissions. Actually, this works even if you put someone that's doesn't have their own book, and you just say, I'm going to give you, let's split 3% override every month on all the commissions on your team. Think about it. If the commission last month was 100,000 and they're going to get 3,000, next month it goes down to 90,000. Your margins of the firm went down 10%. Their bonus went down by $300. It's ineffective. It pays them the same override no matter the company's going up or down. It's not that effective. Here's what you should do. And if they're a team lead, they spend most of their time on growing their own book of business to maximize their commissions with little time or effort on developing the team. You give someone that's a team lead and they've got their own book, you give them a 2.5 or 3% override on the rest of their team. And this sounds really nasty. I don't mean it. Not everybody's going to do this. Some are going to say, I don't have to do anything to develop those people because I'm making 2.5% on their stuff and my regular commissions. So what are some good alternatives? Here's a good one. I do this all the time. You would say, okay, Tom, you're the team, you're the VP of sales, you're the VP recruiting, or you're whatever it is. The gross margin in Q1 was 600,000. This is the baseline for going into Q2. Q2, the GM was 700,000, so we grew 100,000 over the Q1 baseline. Let's say you give 1% on the baseline. My math is wrong. You're giving 1% on 600,000. That should be 6,000. My math is wrong. Sorry. But let's say you give 10% on the growth. So you probably shouldn't be giving 1% on the 600,000. I'm doing a plan right now for someone that's pretty big, and they're getting 0.25%. So sorry for the mistake here, but you get the point. If the gross margin does not go up, I'm going to pay you a little bit for holding steady. For smaller companies, it might be 1% on the baseline. For larger companies, it could be a quarter or 0.5. You get the issue, or you get the example. But it could be between 7 and 10% on the growth. But guess what? Q3, the new baseline 700,000. So each quarter, you pay them a nice premium on the commission, on the gross margin in the firm above the previous quarter's baseline, but that becomes the high watermark for the next quarter. If they're a player coach and you put them in a plan like this, that's great, but don't count their commissions in the quarterly baseline or growth. Really need to be modeled out based on both the size of the team and target bonus. Unlimited upside for significant growth. Bonus based on growing people. You could give a bonus using the monthly spread ramp schedule. If they hit their first break-even month by month 5, give them a bonus. For every person that's above average, give them a bonus. I'm going real quickly here. You guys can get the slides. Be careful on giving a bonus for performers that have large GM but are cruising. Bonus based on SMART goals or MBOs. Those are harder to administer because we tend to get lazy sometimes, but those can be effective. But it's up to you as their manager to say, I'll make this up on the fly. I'll give you a $3,000 bonus next quarter if you read 2 books on leadership and you come to me and tell me, what did you learn and how are you putting that in practice with your team? But you got to get that in writing. And if you ever give SMART, that acronym, or MBOs, put in your comp plan. It's incumbent on you as a subordinate to agree in writing with me as your boss before the beginning of the next quarter what your new bonus is going to be based on. And I got to sign off on it. If you don't do that, you're not eligible for that quarter for a bonus. Put the burden on them. For larger firms, good budget process. You can see this all. I really do want to save some time for some Q&A. Just get the deck from a TechServe. So what are you going to do? I've thrown a lot at you today. I hope. Sorry that I had to go pretty fast there at the end. I wish we had an hour and a half. But I hope you agree that there's nothing in here that is nuclear physics. You look at it a couple times, first glance, this is pretty easy to understand. So what are each of you going to do to commit to doing to improve your comp plans? What separates growing companies from those that stagnate is discipline of execution. I see it over and over and over again. Companies that are at 5 million, 10 million, a lot of our TechServe members are terrific companies at 5, 10, 15 million. They aspire to go to 50 million, but they don't have the discipline of execution. You got to make some hard decisions. You got to get good as a leader, all that stuff. So in essence, discipline of execution enables growing companies to maximize. You can read this. It sounds like the Holy Grail. But this is so, so important. I work with a company. I'm not going to mention their name. I'm really not even doing consulting with them anymore. A little bit, a couple of their senior execs on a couple of my roundtables. I started working with the owner in 2009. He was my third customer. They were 18 million. Today, the owner lives elsewhere. He's got a CEO running his company, and he'll do $290 million. But he had discipline of execution. He developed leadership. He brought in new leaders. He did all the stuff around comp that we're talking about here, and then some. So with that, here's a slide on the TechServe conference. Angie or anybody at TechServe, if you haven't signed up, please consider signing up. It's really, really good. There's some great sessions. And what I really like, I haven't missed a TechServe conference since 2001, other than the virtual one we have with COVID. What I really like, years ago, a lot of owners in this business said, oh, I'm not going to network with my peers because everything I do, they just had this notion that everything I do is proprietary. Very little that what you do is proprietary. You might not want to discuss your specific customers, but very little that we do to grow an IT staffing company is some proprietary secret sauce. So my network, obviously I'm a consultant in the industry, so I've got, if not thousands, close to that people in the industry that I network with. But probably my most valuable network of friends and colleagues was because I went to conference for 24 straight years, and I met a lot of people. I love to give. I like to listen. So please, if you haven't gone to conference, and you can still sign up, and it's very cost effective. So thanks for participating. Any questions? Here's my email. But I've got to go to the Q&A in the chat. Here's one question. On the producer scoreboard, does the burden cost include commissions or strictly salary and burden when determining the multiple? Absolutely commissions as well. Great question. Because you're paying Social Security taxes on, up to whatever it is, 175,000. It definitely needs to be that. Someone else said, what's your opinion on a GM credit on a deal split 50-50 between recruiter and salesperson? So for a deal that makes 4K, great question. Some of the industry does 50-50. They split the margin two ways. You're never going to get a 4 multiple. It's more like a 2 multiple, and that's fine. You just need to understand the math. Do most agencies count GM twice, meaning 100% credit? Yes. If someone is paying commissions only on 50% of the margin, their commission percents are double. They have to be to stay competitive. Hope that makes sense. Some other things coming up in chat. All webinars are stored. We get through these all. Are these GM numbers split adjusted? That's the third person. Sorry that I didn't say these are all 100% to both sides, which I think is the most common. I think 80% of the does that. What else do we have?
How soon into training do we give margin calculators to new entry-level trainees?
Well, I would give margin calculators. Frankly, I would use I would use a ramp schedule when you're interviewing people and show them, use as a motivator on that ramp schedule on, if you hit 2 years and you're at our all-star category, you're going to be making $250,000 a year. But I would give a margin calculator absolutely the day you start training. They need to understand how to calculate margins. Absolutely. Someone says, is it possible to get a copy of the spreadsheet with the presentation? I got to think about that. I'm in the consulting business, so I use that in my business all the time. What else? That could be it. Am I missing anything, Angie? Sorry.
Looks like all questions are answered.
Okay. Well, it's 1:31. I know we try to get this done by 1:35, so no more questions. But if any of you are at conference, there's probably going to be. I'm not doing a comp session. There might be one. I haven't seen the whole conference schedule, but please consider going there. And one of the pitches for TechServe. Obviously, I've been involved with TechServe for many years. I'm still on the executive committee of the board. Very proud of how TechServe has come along, and very proud of. I love what I do. It's obviously good for my consulting business, but I am so involved with TechServe and just love where they're going. Please, please. One of my pet peeves is too many people sign up for TechServe. Thank you, thank you, thank you, but they don't spend enough time understanding some of the stuff that's out there. If any of you are not using, Angie, what's the HR thing that's free?
Compliance HR.
Compliance HR. If you went out and bought Compliance HR on your own, it's $11,000. It's yours for the asking. And it'll show for all 50 states in the country. It'll show the state, local, and in some places, city rules. Well, they're overtime rules, all that stuff. It's yours for the asking. And a lot of people don't use it. There's so many things that TechServe has available. And then if anybody wants to get a refresher, talk to Angie or talk to Julie. Julie onboards new folks, and she's Angie. Maybe if you sent to the people here Julie's email, she's more than happy to walk you through some of the tools and freebies, if you will, that are available. So I'll get off my stool. Love TechServe. Encourage everybody to take a look, and this deck, the PowerPoint, is absolutely available. Angie can send it to you or get it off the website, and implement some of this stuff. It's good for you. With that, thank you very much for your time, everybody.
A big thank you to Tom, and thank you all for joining. We ask that you please fill out the survey upon exiting this webinar. As another reminder, the 2024 TechServe Executive Summit registration is open. Our next webinar will be the legal minefield facing IT and engineering staffing firms in 2024 and beyond on Thursday, September 26th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please send any further questions to staff@techservealliance.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.